Yo, what's good? Welcome back. I am so excited for what we're doing today. I'm really looking forward to digging deeper into this worship category again. I am so blessed to have the man that I have sitting beside me today talking about this. We're going to introduce him in just a second, but I do want to say first, thank you so much for the love that we got on the last one. There was a lot of support. A lot of people really enjoyed that topic, and so I'm really excited to jump deeper into it. We're going to take what we were just talking about, what worship truly is, and now we're going to talk more application. And we're going to go deeper into what that looks like, taking this mindset, this new idea of worship, or really what shouldn't be a new idea, something that we should all understand, and take that and grow upon it and go deeper into how we can apply it in life. But before we go there, I want to introduce you to my man, Justin Crosby. Justin, go ahead and just tell a little bit about yourself, what you do, your age, that sort of stuff.
I'm Justin. I lead worship, and I go to Abundant Life Church of God, but I am a part of Vision Ministries.
Oh,
I help out with the worship with that, and I'm blessed to be here, just living life, man.
For sure. So one thing we always do on here, and I'm actually kind of putting you on the spot here, we always ask what the best advice you've ever received is.
Oh, that's tough. I don't know. I think the best advice somebody could give me, which is simple, probably sounds cheesy, but to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
So
That's good, actually. Nobody's brought that up, and I actually really like that. That's a great answer. So let's dive in a little bit. Before we jump into the full-on application of this mindset of worship, I want to ask you, what does worship mean to you? What does worship look like for you?
What it means to me is the doing away with self and glorifying Jesus, and that looks like, like my life should be a living sacrifice, and I can't worry about me. I shouldn't worship the things around me. I should worship one person, and that's Jesus. So that's what worship is to me.
No, that's real. And so inside of that understanding of almost sacrificing yourself or your own emotions or your own pride in that moment, and looking up to the Father and talking to him, or giving him the glory and lifting his name on high. In your everyday walk in life, what things do you do, apply, look at? What are some of the things that you would consider in your everyday walk that is worship?
I mean, just communication with the Father. I mean, that, people might not see that as worship, but if I am constantly like, Lord, I love you. Thank you for today. Thank you for this. Like that's a part of worship. And one thing I do throughout my day is I constantly ask Jesus, help me.
Mm-hmm.
I need help. Like, I can't do this without you. And, looking on another side of it, when I'm at work or whatever I'm doing, I do everything to the best of my ability. Like, I put everything into it just because it's not for me, it's for who I serve. And that is a form of worship that a lot of people overlook. It's like, even in the church, some people, it's like, oh, I just come here and I do this and I do that every week. It's just my routine, but it's not a routine. You are serving Jesus in everything you do, and you're showing him through everything that you do. So, doing everything to the best of your ability, that is a form of worship, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of understanding that every moment is an opportunity to worship him changes that perspective of seeing thing as, oh, it's just another week.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just another Sunday that I'm going into this building.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell people God loves them.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, understanding that worship is all around me, that every moment is an opportunity to worship him, it makes me want to do it at my greatest opportunity, ability, whatever word you want to put in there. And so from that and understanding that form of worship, do you feel like it's important to constantly stay in a mindset of worship, or do you feel it's something to where worship comes from time to time and there's moments in between? Because I've heard different people say it different ways, that like, some people feel like worship is thrown around too much, like that term and that word. And I could see and understand that a little bit, but also I try to stay in a mindset of worship because of what my definition of worship is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's why I truthfully want to hear, one, like, what is the definition of worship in your opinion and your thoughts? Because I don't think necessarily that for every person is going to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I think inside of that, how has that affected your walk and your mindset towards it?
I think the church has, they've taken worship and taken it from being a lifestyle and made it an atmosphere. And that is not, when we look at the disciples, Peter, you mentioned this other week, how he's walking and the shadow heals a man. Like that, that is walking in worship. Like that is walking in the fullness of the Holy Spirit and the fullness of what Jesus has for you. Like worship, it shouldn't be just subjugated to a moment in time. It should be what we live out through our life. Like me, I can't, I can't just be like, oh, well, this is when I worship. I have to constantly, I'm worshiping now as I walk. Yeah. It's different because, you see people that get up and they try to create an atmosphere of worship, or an atmosphere of, a movement of God, maybe. Like if somebody stands up in a plane and starts trying to do worship and stuff, it's like what they're doing is no different than me just talking to the person next to me and being like, hey, do you know who Jesus is, right? It's super simple. So I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Is it Alex?
Yeah,
that's
Alex.
Funny. We were planning on having another guest, and he just texted, but it's all good. We'll hope to get him on here another day. I love that idea of like understanding worship is in the atmosphere. Like that was really good, and I really hope if you're listening, you grasp that. That's really good. I really love that. I could have dropped the mic right there. I probably just said that one quote, and that could be the whole episode. But I'm not happy with it. Let's keep moving forward. Let's keep digging deeper, because I do know that there's more that we can get into inside of this, and something that I know for you feel called to lead worship.
Yeah.
And so inside of that call, because I know there's people that also listen to this that are in the same place as you. They feel called to lead worship, but they haven't necessarily taken on the role yet when it comes to being on staff.
Mm-hmm.
But in my opinion, you're leading worship in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Still, it may not be that you are getting paid for the obligation, but you can still have that persona, and people can still have that outlook upon you. You can still be a leader of worship in so many different forms.
Yeah.
So for you, in the process where you feel like God has you right now, when it comes to being a leader of worship, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
It's not, being a worship leader is not a credential. It's an anointing. And the thing is, I'm not on a church staff, and sometimes it's frustrating because, I'm there when the doors open, and I'm just ready to be in a role where I can just serve and not have to worry about anything else, and which I'm glad to do it. I wouldn't need to get paid to do ministry.
Absolutely.
Like if ministry wasn't a paying job, I'd still do it. I'd be prepared to go out in the streets and live on literally live on the streets and do worship, and I think that, if somebody were in my shoes and they're thinking because they're not getting paid, because they don't have a big stage, because of this and that they're not truly a worship leader, that's wrong. Like if that's the mindset we have, then we shouldn't be leading worship. As a worship leader, like a true worship leader, I have to go on stage and it's not just about singing a song. It's not just about singing something I like or something I listen to. And I felt like the Lord was telling me this the other day. And this doesn't happen to me often, but I felt God speak to me, Justin, stop singing about what I could potentially do for you and start singing about my character.
Oh, wow.
You know? And I was like, if like turn me upside down, I was just like you're right. Like I've constantly been focusing on, you know, you made me a promise and you can take me there, and just songs I listen to, and it's like, you know, a song that everybody loves and sings to is Champion.
Yeah.
And the bridges that on that is when I lift my voice and shout, miracles start breaking out. It's like, yeah, like, you know, that's great, but I can't do that. That's not me.
Exactly.
You know? And so it's about, I don't know, when you get on stage, you have to make sure that your heart is in the place of, I don't deserve to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I do, I always keep in my mind, I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve anything. And it's because of that God can trust me with that. And so, I don't know, you know, I try to keep that in mind, and I try to do the best I can. And just like I was saying, like I try to sing songs that talk about who Jesus is, talk about, you know, the victory I have through him, not the victory that I can find myself, because when I've done it myself, I always fail. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think, again, that's something else, like that realization changes your worship.
Yeah.
And changes your thought towards worship. You know, that's, for me, one of my biggest things I feel like God has always hit me on the head with, is that humility.
Yeah.
Like, realizing I did not do this. And even I was talking with one of my close friends, Emmy Moore, shout out Emmy, if she's listening, literally yesterday about this, how in our journeys, most of the time, when God moves and when something big happens, there's no way it could have been us.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Because if even in the slightest way I was able to say that I did it, my flesh is probably going to try to abuse that.
Yeah.
And try to take advantage of that.
Yep.
And going about my journey and knowing so many other people's journeys and thinking about the process, it's like only God could have done this. And in that place, that's just yet another reason for me to worship him.
Yeah.
To sing his praises. You know, I love that you're not talking about what he could potentially do, but what if we also sang about what he's done?
Yeah, the victory we already have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think by proclaiming that victory, you're speaking victory into your future and into your next steps. That's something, you know, I hear people say all the time, like, miracles can only happen where there's faith.
Yeah.
You know, like, if your actions, any movement does not cause a miracle, your faith causes the miracle. And taking that and thinking about that in even a deeper way inside of my worship, like, my worship comes from my faith in who he is. No, speaking of what he's done, singing of what he's done, praising for what he's done, because I have the faith that those things are only going to compound and become even greater in the future. And by speaking out that faith and by this being an expression of that, it opens the door to the moves that we see and the crazy things that happen. So that's really cool. Yeah, I really like that. And so to get even more practical here, to relate deeper to someone who might be in the same position as you, what do you feel like right now are things that you wish you could learn about the opportunity, the role of leading worship? You know, maybe this answer from you could open up the door for me to say, hey, so-and-so, will you come on the podcast next and answer these questions? You know, or even, you know, answering some things, talking about what you've already done and what you've learned inside of that, kind of like just like what you were doing. In this process, what are some things he's shown you and some things that you feel like you're still trying to learn?
I would definitely say I'm learning constantly about, like when I felt the call, I made sure like I need to know everything there is to know about this, you know. I've got to study it. I've got to know on, you know, obviously my first pursuit should be I should be in the word. I should, you know, I need to make sure my source is from the Lord.
Absolutely.
And so I would say practically what I've learned is before, you know, when I'm coming up with songs for next week, you know, I like to, me personally, I spend at least an hour sitting and praying and playing what I feel the Lord is leading me to. And usually in that, I'll get songs and I'll get, you know, a theme of what he kind of wants me to, you know, do. And I've learned that it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, don't stress yourself when you try to start out, because I got, when I first started playing piano and singing on Wednesdays, I was so caught up in being a perfectionist and making it sound good that I quenched the spirit when I was doing it. And so that's something that I would tell a young person. Don't get caught up in, you know, trying to make it sound good, because you have to use what you have around you.
Yeah.
And so obviously, you know, when you start out, especially if you're in a youth setting, you're not going to have professional musicians. You're not going to have professional equipment. And so that's something to not get caught up into, because it's easy to get, you know, to be like, well, they have this, and compare yourself to other churches or worship people.
Yeah.
Something I would say that I'm wanting to learn, I don't know, just in a practical sense, you know, something I would want to get better at is, you know, transitions in a song, you know, or chord structures that, you know, kind of fit better with, you know, maybe when a pastor's preaching, or maybe, you know, to kind of intro into another song, you know, and stuff like that. It's very like, I don't know. It's stuff that, it's small stuff, but it's effective stuff that I'm still trying to learn.
And those are definitely things I feel like that comes more from experience too. Like
definitely.
as you go, you begin to notice and learn what chords do lead better to other ones, and how all of those things mesh. And like, even there was a conference I went to about 2 months ago now. I think it was in February, in Tampa, Florida, and one of the bishops was there speaking, and he had a piano player come with him. Like, he brought somebody with him that they were clearly around the same age. They clearly were really good friends. You know, they had probably played together for
probably
50 years. And it was honestly, it was like funny to watch how they interacted. Like, this dude was just back there having a like, he was laughing out loud hysterically, just having a great time playing with this dude. And in that moment, what the pastor was speaking on really spoke to me, but it was also looking at that dude in the back, just enjoying his, like, that was his expression of worship. The way that he could bring value to this sermon, to this conversation. And it was honestly so cool to kind of see that interaction. And I feel like, you know, over time, how good it sounded, how great it was, simply came from the fact that they were together for so long. And so, those are definitely things, you know, that I feel like would come over time.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's a huge part of any part of it. Like, that's something that I've learned. Is somebody asked me one time, it was like a younger high school kid. He shocked me with the question, honestly. He was like, so when you got started, everything that you've learned now, do you think you could have learned it on day one?
Yeah, that's...
And I was like, huh. I was like, that's actually, like, for me, it was like, that's a good question to ask other people, to, like, check them and be like, hey, look. But he was wholeheartedly meaning, like, is there any way that I could go ahead and learn all this stuff? And I was like, okay, who are you? First off, like, why do you care this much? You're a sophomore in high school. You should be worrying about chicks in your hair, not worrying about this. But two, I was like, actually, no, not a shot. Like, it took me going through it and failing and learning. We were just talking about that, how you feel like God's kind of pushing you, and how I'm kind of in that same place where it's like, all right, God, like, I'm just going to jump. I'm going to do whatever. If it costs me money, I don't really care. God, I trust you with my money. I'll give it, doing all of those things. And I feel like over time, that experience and those things and that willingness is just kind of all
Mm-hmm.
inside of our worship.
Yeah.
Like those are all forms of worship, in my opinion. Thinking about, gratitude, thinking about humility, thinking about being willing, all of that is just like, God, I'm here to worship you. I'm here to lift your name on high. And whatever that looks like, whatever you're asking from me, I'm going to do it and do it willingly
Mm-hmm.
and do it openly. So I love that. That's really good. And we'll ask one more question, and we'll wrap this thing up. But with worship, with what we would deem as worship and what hopefully culture is moving towards as worship, and applying it in life and looking at it in daily walks, what encouragement would you have for the person that this is their first time looking at it that way? What things would you say, like, try this out, or an encouragement of just stick to it?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? Because I know for me, there was a realization in the difference at one point, and it was like, okay, let me carry this on. And let me ask it to you in this way. One, when you had that realization, what things changed for you? And then two, what advice would you have for the person trying to mold that and shape that?
So when I had the realization, like when I was going into worship, when I knew that when I felt the call,
Yeah.
The realization I had is that, because when I felt called, I didn't even, I spent my entire life trying to find my identity through sports.
Yeah.
High school, you go to high school and it's like you were saying, your girls, making sure your hair looks good and trying to be a star athlete,
Yeah, that's it.
And music, and it's funny how God works, because when I was in middle school, I remember this just like it was yesterday. My music teacher told me that she had convinced a kid that wanted to be a pro athlete. She was like, music changed his life, and he quit doing sports and went into music. And I was like, that's not me. I'm going to the NFL. And it's just funny because I look back and I laugh at myself, because I'm like, God he was shaping things to happen, and it's like, now I look back, I can see the bigger picture. When I felt the call, I realized that, my life is not my own.
Mm-hmm.
What I want, what I desire, like, yes, God knows our heart's desires, and he can give those things to you as long as it's in his will, as long as he wills it. If it's something of the world or something that's outside of his will, then oftentimes those things are better to stay away from, because he knows, you don't need to go down that path, because it'll lead to a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and it'll probably draw you away from me.
Yeah.
And he knew if I went to college for football, I wouldn't be the person I am. I'd be in a ditch somewhere probably. But I just, it's that realization of my life is not my own, and like what he's calling me to is bigger than what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't see it all. I don't want to see it all. To encourage somebody that maybe feels that call, I would say, if they think they, like, if it's like, okay, I think I want to do this. Actually, the guy that was going to be on here, Alex, told me when we were talking about ministry and going into it and stuff, and he said that, when I used to be all for it, and when my students would come to me and I'd be like, yeah, that's great, like, encourage them and stuff, but he told me that he's gotten away from that, because now he asks them, okay, if you want to go into ministry, do you feel like if you didn't, you would be disobeying God? And that's how you know.
Wow.
And so and that's for me, like, if I was not doing what I'm doing now, I would feel like I'm in disobedience. And I've had opportunities to get jobs that would be careers outside
Yeah.
of ministry. That's not what I'm called to. That's not what I'm supposed to be here for.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would encourage people to really pray about, if they feel the calling, and to go off of, do I feel like I'm disobeying if I don't do this? Am I living out disobedience? And I was actually talking about this last night. We were talking about the difference between obedience and worship, and a lot of people think that worship is obedience. But God gives us His love language, and His love language is obedience. Those who love me will obey my commands. So you can't worship unless you are obeying.
Yeah.
And so, like I was saying, you can't be a worship leader if you're in disobedience.
Yeah.
So that goes along with everything in life. If you aren't, in your word praying, if you're not doing the things that God calls us to do, then you can't truly worship. We're supposed to worship in spirit and truth.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not living a truthful life to what the word says, how can I truly worship? So I don't know.
That's really good. That's really, really good. And I think, honestly, every bit of that applies to so much more than just that one call.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely can relate to that. If I wasn't doing what I was doing right now, I'd constantly be in the back of my head thinking, like, did I let him down? Did I not do this right? And so that's really good. And I think that's a perfect spot to wrap it up. Leave people with that thought. Let them kind of think about that themselves. Or if there's something you're already 100% confident in, practice the attitude of worship and the mindset of worship. Keep your head in heaven.
True.
Don't let it get into things that are of this world that can tear you down, that can hold you back. Give that to Him and worship Him for it. And so I hope this was amazing for you. I hope this is exactly what you needed as the listener or the watcher. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that little bell, hit the subscribe, leave a comment of what you want the next series to be on. So this is the second of 3 episodes we're going to be going over worship on. So we have one more after this one, and then we're going to be jumping into a new category. We're going to be jumping into something a little bit different. So leave a comment, or if you're on any of the podcast platforms, I'm going to put a little Q&A box for Spotify so that you can insert thoughts there or other topics you'd like to hear us talk on. And if you're on Apple, leave a review and let us know. Also, rate us 5 stars, do all that stuff. Any of that stuff really, really does help. It pushes us to new heights when you do things like that. So if you would, I'd greatly appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed this. JC, thank you for coming on, bro.
No problem.
It means a lot for you to be here and to share your wisdom with the listener. And other than that, I hope you have a great week. I hope that last week was amazing, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks. God bless.